Operation Overlord, the Airborne Troops, a four-part series about the paratroopers and glider soldiers of the United States, Canada, Britain, and France on June 6, 1944. Episode 4, The Achievements, what the airborne troops really changed. By the evening of June 6, 1944, the Allies had a beachhead in France. The beaches were secured. The first tanks rolled inland. Engineers were already building temporary harbors out of concrete and steel. Supply ships waited offshore in numbers no German general had imagined possible. But without the men who had come the night before with parachutes and gliders, that day might have ended very differently. A single intact bridge in German hands, a single working battery firing on Sword Beach, a single road left open for a panzer division. Any one of these things could have turned victory into disaster. What did these soldiers really achieve? How big was their contribution? And why are we still talking about them more than 80 years later? Success in war is hard to measure. Some battles are won by taking a city, others by holding a bridge, and some by something that never even happens. An attack the enemy never launches because he is distracted. A reinforcement that never arrives because the railway has been cut. A counterattack that fails because the officer in charge is hours late. The airborne troops achieve success on all three levels. Some of their deeds are famous, others are nearly forgotten. Some are still debated by historians today, but together, they made the invasion possible in the first place. In this episode, we'll look at what each of the four nations actually changed by being there that night, and how their work fits into the larger picture of the war. Part 1. The Americans, roads opened, beachhead secured. The American paratroopers carried out their most important task. They opened the roads behind Utah Beach. When the soldiers of the 4th Infantry Division landed on the sand, they found the most important crossings already in American hands. The men of the 101st had taken the causeways. The men of the 82nd had cleared the inland roads. Sainte-Mère-Église was free. The road to Cherbourg was open. German counterattacks from the north were stopped before they could even reach the beach. Everything the 101st and 82nd Airborne had achieved in the night paid off in the morning. The German response had also been crippled by the airborne attack. With telephone lines cut, radio stations destroyed, and small groups of paratroopers appearing in unexpected places, German commanders had no clear idea where the main assault was. Some thought the night drops were just a diversion. Some thought a second landing was coming farther north. By the time the picture became clear, it was already too late, but the meaning went further. The men of the American Airborne had shown that a completely new kind of warfare worked. A force that lands behind enemy lines at night, organizes itself without senior officers, and shapes an entire sector of the front. Nothing like it had been done on this scale before. The losses were heavy. Of the roughly 13,000 American paratroopers who jumped that night, around 2,500 were killed, wounded, captured, or missing within the first 24 hours. Many never had a chance to fight. They drowned in flooded fields, were shot in their parachutes, or were captured before they could find their units. But the strategy had worked. In the weeks that followed, these same men kept fighting through the hedgerows of Normandy, then in Operation Market Garden in the Netherlands, and later in the brutal winter battles of the Ardennes. The 101st would become famous for its defense of Bastogne. The 82nd would build a reputation as one of the toughest divisions in the entire U.S. Army. The American Airborne became a symbol for an entire generation, not because of films or books, because they delivered on the darkest night of the war. Part 2, the British, the flank that held. The contribution of the British 6th Airborne Division is hard to overstate. Pegasus Bridge was captured within 10 minutes and held for hours until reinforcements arrived. The guns of Merville were taken out before they could fire a single shell at the beach. The entire eastern flank of the invasion was in British hands by the end of the first day. If the Germans had broken through here, they could have rolled up the entire Allied line from east to west. The British 3rd Infantry Division landing at Sword Beach would have been hit in the rear. The Canadians at Juno Beach would have been cut off. The whole invasion could have collapsed, but they didn't get through. The 6th Airborne held a line along the high ground east of the Orne River, supported by glider-borne reinforcements that arrived throughout the day. They were attacked by elements of the German 21st Panzer Division, the only panzer division close enough to react on D-Day itself. The British stopped them with anti-tank guns, with Piat launchers, with grenades thrown into open tank hatches at close range. In the weeks after D-Day, the 6th Airborne stayed in Normandy and fought on as regular infantry. Men trained for short, hard operations held the line for nearly 3 months. They were worn down by mortar fire, by snipers, by the constant strain of frontline combat. They were not relieved until September. By then, their losses approached 50%. Pegasus Bridge later became one of the most famous symbols of the invasion. A museum stands there today. The original bridge has been preserved, moved to a special site near the new bridge that replaced it. Anyone who stands there can imagine just how astonishing it was to capture it from a glider in the dark. The Merville Battery, too, has been preserved. Visitors can walk through the same concrete bunkers Otway's men stormed that night. Inside, names are carved into the walls, memorials to the men who died taking the position. Part 3, the Canadians, the invisible pillar. The Canadians are often forgotten in the stories of D-Day, not because their contribution was small, because they did their job so well that nothing dramatic happened. If you blow up a bridge the enemy needed, you prevent a battle that then never takes place. If you hold a position no one ever gives up, you stop a breakthrough that nobody ever has to talk about. Success in war sometimes leaves the smallest mark on the history books. That is exactly what the Canadians did at Le Mesnil and along the eastern flank. They held, day after day, week after week, without headlines, without famous photographs. Their war was one of patrols, of small ambushes, of long nights waiting for an attack that might or might not come. Their losses were heavy. Out of about 540 men who jumped on June 6th, only around 200 were still fit for duty when the battalion was finally withdrawn from Normandy in early September. The rest were dead, wounded, captured, or evacuated with illness. For a battalion that had trained for 2 years, those losses were a heavy price, but they had done their part. The nation of Canada had shown that it could not only send soldiers, it could send an elite. The 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion was one of the first units to enter Germany from the west in 1945, crossing the Rhine in Operation Varsity, the largest single-day airborne operation in history. It would later be present at the meeting of Allied and Soviet forces near the Baltic Sea. Later, the Canadians fought on through the Netherlands, where they are still remembered today with deep gratitude. Dutch towns hold ceremonies every year to honor the Canadians who freed them. Many families still maintain personal contact with the descendants of the soldiers who came through their villages in 1944 and 1945. Their story deserves more attention than it usually gets. Part 4, the French. A victory that was more than military. The contribution of the French SAS paratroopers cannot be measured in numbers alone. Of course, they tied down German troops. Of course, they blew up rails and attacked convoys. Of course, they helped delay the SS Das Reich division. But their real meaning was something else. They were the sign that France had not been defeated, that there were Frenchmen returning to free their country. For the French population, for the resistance, for the people in the occupied territories, that was a signal stronger than any explosive charge. Operations Dingson and Samwest were expanded in the weeks that followed. More and more French paratroopers dropped in. More and more resistance groups joined them. By August, much of Brittany had been liberated by French and American forces working together. The major ports of Brest, Lorient, and Saint-Nazaire would hold out longer, but the countryside belonged once again to the French. The numbers tell part of the story. A few hundred French SAS paratroopers, working with around 30,000 resistance fighters in Brittany, helped pin down roughly 100,000 German troops who could otherwise have been sent to Normandy. That ratio of force achieved is rarely matched in modern warfare. After the war, this small force became the root of modern French special forces. The traditions of the SAS lived on in units like the Premier Régiment de Parachutistes d'Infanterie de Marine, which still exists today. Their badge still carries echoes of the wartime SAS. Their training still draws on the lessons learned in the hills of Scotland and the forests of Brittany. For the men themselves, the war was personal in a way few others could understand. They had come home with weapons in their hands. They had freed villages where their grandparents had lived. They had seen their language spoken openly again in places that had been silent for 4 years. If you ask in the end what the airborne troops really achieved on June 6, 1944, the answer is simple. They bought time. Time for the men on the beaches, time for the ships landing tanks and supplies, time for engineers to clear obstacles and build harbors, time for an army that had to fight its way from the sand into the countryside. They confused the enemy. German commanders didn't know where the main attack was during that night. Some thought it was a diversion. Some held their reserves back. waiting for a second landing that never came. Those hours of uncertainty were decisive. By the time Hitler personally authorized the release of the Panzer Reserves, the Allies had already pushed inland and dug in. And they showed that human beings in extreme situations can do more than any plan asks of them. Men who landed in the wrong place found each other. Men who lost their gear kept fighting. Men who lost their officers took command themselves. The lesson of the Airborne on D-Day is not really about parachutes or weapons. It is about what people can do when everything depends on them and there is no one else left to do it. Out of the many small stories of that night came the victory of that day. And out of the victory of that day came, in the end, a free Europe. If you enjoyed this 4-part series, leave a like and tell me in the comments which of these 4 nations impressed you the most. And if you want to know what happened in the weeks after D-Day, subscribe to the channel. The story is far from over.